Fireside, CharLA series, brought to you in partnership with United Latinx Fund and Latino Coalition of Los Angeles. I'm Richard Corral, Interim Executive Director of the United Latinx Fund. This online event series aims to engage, educate, and advocate on important and timely topics that impact LA's Latinx community during the COVID-19 pandemic and current moment of civil unrest around police brutality. I'd like to quickly thank sponsors of tonight's event, Southern California Gas Company and JP Morgan Chase, for their commitment to and investment in nonprofits like United Latinx Fund that work to transform, uplift, and improve our community's quality of life. Our program is designed to engage you, our audience. So if you have questions, please enter your questions in the chat box. Please note that everyone's audio and video will be muted until the Q&A. Also, tonight's program is streaming on Facebook Live. So to access that video, please visit ULF's Facebook page, and a link will be provided in the chat box now. Tonight's conversation centers on ACA 5 and affirmative action. And for the first time in a generation, California will have an opportunity to reinstate equal opportunity policies like affirmative action that rebuild the path toward a stronger economic future for women and communities of color. Also, the LGBT community as well, which we'll hear a little bit more about from Rick Spur later on during the mixer. With us tonight to discuss this very important topic is California Assembly Member Miguel, who represents the 53rd Assembly District, which includes downtown LA, Boyle Heights, and other surrounding areas. Also, Dr. Elisha Arrillaga, Executive Director of the Education Trust West, a research and advocacy organization focused on educational justice and supporting achievement for all California students, with a particular focus on underserved students of color, low-income students, and English language learners. Lastly, we're fortunate to welcome a crew of special guests that would also like to share their leadership crafting and passing ACA 5, including last week's special guest speaker and BFF of Assemblymember Santiago, Assemblymember Mike Gibson, who, along with Assemblymember Dr. Shirley Weber from San Diego, co-introduced ACA 5. We also have Rick Spur, Executive Director of Equality California, and we also have UC Regent President and former Speaker of the California State Assembly, and most importantly, ULF Advisory Board Member, John Bettis. What a lineup we have tonight. I'm very excited. So let's get started without any further delay. First question, what is affirmative action? What is ACA 5? And what does it do? Let's start with Assemblymember Santiago. Take it away.
Sure, and thank you very much. And if the doctor just wants to jump in, I love the opportunity just to go back and forth. And I can tell right now we're going to be a great tag team effort. Let me start off with ACA and what that all meant, right? So we had the ban of affirmative action back in the mid-90s, I believe, and it was during the Pete Wilson era in California. And we saw at that time Proposition 187, 227 that attacked our language. But we're seeing a different California today, one in which we in California are very different than the Trump administration in the sense that we are, while California values its immigrants, the Trump administration tries to deport everyone and keep our families in cages. So we're very different. So when we took a look at affirmative action, and that's the ability to use gender, culture, race as one of the elements that you would take a look at to trying to complete diversity in every aspect of society. That was eliminated back in the mid-90s through Prop 209. And so here we are 20-something years later, having the opportunity in the legislature for the first time, this is a very contentious issue, for the first time to be able to pass with overwhelming majority because California today, the legislature today, wants an opportunity for all, period. That's the bottom line. We want everybody to have an opportunity We now know that we need that opportunity. I think most of us would agree that communities of colors have left behind, both in contracting at the state level, state employment, admissions to universities, and even today, a woman makes 80% of what a male makes in any industry. And if you're a single mother or a woman of color, you're making about 60% less than your male white counterpart. So I think it's time at a very high level, time to crush something that has kept communities of color behind, so we can finally achieve opportunity for all and the diversity that California is. I don't know if you want to jump in, Doctor.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you laid out, and just really want to double down on the point that Prop 16 is about equal opportunity for all, and that too many Californians right now are still denied equal economic and educational opportunity because of their race, ethnicity, and gender. The other important thing to note about affirmative action is that this whole movement started with students. Last year, Dr. Weber was talking with students at one of the UCs who came up to her and said, hey, we see some issues with the diversity of the population that we see around us, not reflecting the diversity of California. And they asked her to move this forward. And so I think it's really important to note that, this is something that is coming from students, from communities, and that as part of that, it's also important to not be fooled by some of the myths that you may hear around what was ACA 5 and now it's Prop 16, and really, really exciting that it's not about quotas. Affirmative action is not about quotas, which are actually prohibited by the Constitution, but it's about a level playing field and a leg up.
Excellent. And I as someone who went to the University of California at Berkeley.
We won't hold that against you.
Proudly.
That's screen pan down. Do that. In the 90s, in the early 90s, when this was all going down, and to have at this critical moment in time, this piece of legislation being advanced by folks who are my peers, right? And who remember that moment in time. And for many of us, it politicized us. It woke us up and made us realize that there are folks in this world who didn't have our best interest in mind and would take it upon themselves to create policies that would prohibit us from receiving social services and healthcare and being able to fully sit at the table as women, as people of color, as LGBT folks. And it was eye-opening, and I'm not gonna lie, it was hurtful too. And at the same time, it made a lot of us realize that we can't just take this sitting down, and we have to do something. And so for me, and I think for a lot of us, we really marked that moment as the beginning of our political consciousness and engagement. And to have us now at this moment, having this conversation, at this moment in time, it's amazing. And I just personally want to say how proud and how thankful I am, because for me, I thought it was a done deal. I thought that chapter was closed and that was it, and we move on, and I never would have imagined that we would be here having this conversation. So thank you so much, for your leadership.
What's interesting, and I'll just jump in because we're going back and forth.
Sure.
You had every caucus in the legislature support this. That is unprecedented. From the API caucus to the LGBTQ caucus, the Jewish caucus, the Women's caucus, African American caucus, Latino caucus. If I missed one, I apologize. Progressive caucus. You had every caucus stand up and say it's time to give everybody in Caucasian that opportunity that we've denied many generations. 25 years. I mean, there are people on this call who never had an opportunity to opine on this issue, who didn't vote when that issue came up. We have generations of people who we've denied an equal opportunity. And now we give that opportunity back to the young folks, like the people who are on this call, the opportunity to decide for themselves what a California should look like for them. And I'm pretty confident, look, by the energy in the Zoom room, so to speak, and by the demonstrations that we're seeing, by the excitement that we're seeing around this, that we're going to really change California. And this is going to have a huge impact, no doubt, on communities of color and women.
Doctor? One more time.
I was there for a minute, but hear me now?
You can, yes.
Is that better? Okay. I was saying we need this more than ever, given the impact that we also know not having affirmative action has had on women-owned businesses, and the impact we've lost in the state since Prop 209 was passed, over $1 billion, women-owned businesses. And we know that I'm the mother of a 6-year-old myself, and we know that women and gender is extremely important in thinking about how we move our economy forward as a state in really productive ways.
Absolutely. And when it comes to thinking about like the energy in the room that the assembly members spoke about, let's talk about how to harness that. So I know that both of you are part of the Opportunity for All Coalition. Can you share a little bit about who is the Opportunity for All Coalition? What is the goal? And how can ULF and LCLA's supporters get involved? And as a friendly reminder to everybody who's listening in, please do put your questions in the Q&A chat box because we will be having a Q&A. So tell us a little bit about the Opportunity for All Coalition.
I'll let the doctor chime in because I've jumped in first a couple of times, so I apologize.
Oh, sure. Happy to jumpstart. So the Opportunity for All Coalition is now a group of over 500 organizations across the state that are supporting ACA 5 and what is now Prop 16. And so Prop 16 is going to be on the November ballot. And right now there are 4 concrete things that are really important that we do. One is fundraising for the measure and making sure that people know about it. So that means, not only small donations, but large donations, talking to your friends and family about this effort. It's also going to be really important as the date draws closer to volunteer and make sure to be really active around ensuring the general public knows what affirmative action is and what Prop 16 is, especially given that a lot of folks didn't have the opportunity to vote on this before. And then, of course, it's going to be important to vote for it in November. And if you want to learn more, you can go to Vote Yes on prop16.org. And we've shared some other resources that can be put up in the chat box as well.
There it is.
There it is, live.
Vote yes.
Boom.
Prop 16. Cindy, if you could put that in the chat box for everybody. Assembly member, what say you?
Yeah. Well, look, I think she outlined it very, very, very well. The only thing that I would add on is it is critical for you to sign up. It is critical for you to help us to dispel myths when they arise immediately. It is absolutely important that we create an army of folks who go out there and tell the truth about what we're trying to do. We're going to get a good portion of people who are going to, organizations who will request speakers, who will request, who request for us to get them information. And I think the better on everybody here is, it's going to be incredibly helpful. I mean, you, Richard, take a leadership role here, like everybody else who's on here. We may not be able to get to every Zoom call. We're not going to be able to get to every small newspaper. So sign up, work with us to spread the message. Here's what I would press on that was already mentioned, I would highly recommend small donations. Here's why. Because we want to be able to walk in and say, this is people powered, and we know that it is. But oftentimes in politics, people think, why should I donate $5? Why should I donate $3? It's not going to make a difference. It makes a huge difference. We've seen now national campaigns that have been powered by small donations. There's no doubt that we intend to win, and we will win, but we want to make this a people-powered movement. We can walk in and say, we got 100,000 small donations. That is absolutely critical. So I'd encourage everybody, look, if you can give $2, give $2. If you give $10, give $10. Sign up and give something, and that'll be critical. As a nonprofit, you're also able to donate a certain amount. I want you to follow all your rules, obviously, so you need to check with your own tax finance people. We have some guidelines as well. But more importantly, email your networks, vote on Prop 16, vote yes for Prop 16. This is going to be critical. We really need you to do that. I know that every campaign tells you that, right? Oh, it's people powered and we're really looking for grassroots. Believe me, we really are, because the opposition is out there. They've already bought websites. They're already dispelling the information. Look, they put it on the ballot and they're looking to keep it off the books in California. So we're going to need you to text your friends, text your mom and dad, your uncle, your abuela, las comadres. I mean, text everybody you possibly can. We need you to vote for this. As we get closer, spread the message wide, far, and deep.
Those are very clear next steps. Those are steps that we've obviously heard many of us here on the line before, but I think that the likelihood in this instance of the steps actually occurring is high, simply because of, we're in a unique and important and vital presidential election cycle. So, but even yet, in our age and perspective, we've learned the hard way never to take anything for granted and never assume. So pretend like nobody's going to show up today, and start from there and act like no one's going to show up with that level of passion and commitment, so that, we don't leave any box or any stone unturned, because we've been there before and we know what happens.
And Richard, there's going to be a lot of propositions. We want to make sure that we can break through the noise, and the best way to do it, particularly during the COVID era, in the past we can send people to people's houses. In the past we can phone bank. We don't know what the future looks like. That may be a little bit limited. So we genuinely are going to depend on people who, like all the good folks who are listening in today, to just text somebody, email somebody, Facebook it. I know everybody says this, but this is absolutely critical. What would we do in campaign mode as we get closer to November? And let's say the pandemic gets worse. We're still on the ballot, and we're still going to have to communicate with people. And if you can't put a phone bank up, and if you can't go to people's doors, that individual relationship that everybody here has with somebody else is going to be critical to breaking through. Now, we can get any big names and validators on a campaign, but nothing is more important than a family member or someone you trust personally calling you and say, hey, man, This is really important. Can you send this in? That is critical.
And I want the doctor to answer or start off this next question, because at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is we're talking about relationships, and relationships matter. And to that end, the United Latinx Fund, we're a philanthropy, and the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles is a 501c4, and they also have a vast network of nonprofits that have supported their work. So we have to ask, as representatives of the nonprofit community, who in many ways are relationship brokers, right? We are those entities that connect community with need and solution and opportunity. So to that end, what role do nonprofits play in advancing ACA 5, both leading up to and then assuming it passes after the passage? Because then the real work begins. All the work of supplier diversity to a certain extent is really led by nonprofit organizations. So, good doctor, what do you have to say about that?
The nonprofits have a pivotal role to play. And I mean, one of the biggest roles now, to the point that was made earlier, is really about getting the word out in this virtual environment. Never, ever, I think, have the words, "we are the ones we've been waiting for," been more important. Because this is truly a historic moment that we are at this point and that we have this opportunity. And so for nonprofits to use their ability to reach lots of folks virtually in the environment that we're in is super important in order to make sure that people know that this is happening. And the other really important piece is that there's going to be a lot of conversation about higher education around this. And it's important to know that actually a lot of the change is not only in contracting, but also in K-12 education. So there are huge changes that we could see in terms of teacher diversity, in terms of being able to actually target funds to K-12 students that are Latinx, that are Black, which we can't do right now as a state. And so nonprofits really making sure that that message is broader than just higher education and talking about the impacts in K-12 and making sure that everybody in the streets knows this is happening and that this is a must-have conversation and a must-have thing to support is going to be super important.
Yeah, I think what the doctor said is absolutely critical. I'll frame it in a bit of a different way, saying the same thing. It is one thing not to discriminate. It is a whole nother to break down those barriers that have discriminated. And this is what really this is about. The ability to empower communities because we know some communities have been left behind. The ability to finally give every community that equal opportunity for success. And I think she hit it exactly on the nail. We say the same thing, but it's one thing because people used to ask me, don't we have a level playing field? We've all heard the old arguments, right? They've even used Martin Luther King's arguments against this, which is far and beyond ridiculous, but be it as it may, right? But I would break down one more time. It is one thing not to discriminate for all those who believe in that equal society that exists today, which we all know needs a lot of help getting to equality. But let's say it is a whole nother to break those barriers down who have caused that systematic racism in our institutions that we now know have failed us and we need to break down once and for all.
Hear, hear. And I just want to remind folks as we enter the Q&A section to please put your Q&A, your questions in the chat box. We've gotten some great questions and I have to kind of navigate this quickly because I know, Assemblyman, you do have to go in about 4 minutes. So really quickly, un breve anuncio, por favor. Si quiere escuchar este programa en español, por favor, seleccione español en el menú debajo. Gracias. Cindy, if you could please unmute yourself. Cindy is the board president of our partner, the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles. She's also an amazing young Latina leader who also happens to manage and moderate our chat box. Cindy, please take it away.
Thank you, Richard. Well, first of all, I just want to take the time to, thank both of you guys for really just sensing that urgency. I have a great series of questions from the same individual, Mario Ceballos. So I'll go ahead and say it very slowly. Please let me know if you need me to repeat any of the questions.
Hey, Mario.
So the first question, hi, Mario. So the first question is, what will be done this time for the political winds don't create another Prop 209? What will be the key measures that ensure that ACA 5's core purposes is attained? And how will we hold educational institutions and board of donors accountable?
Sure. I'm going to be brief just so we can get through all the questions. But I would simply say, number one, it's not the same California. I mean, it's not the same California we faced 25 years ago. Number one, amen, bottom line. I mean, we Latinos are now becoming a quick majority And we now recognize that the same institutions that have caused institutions to create racism in other communities of color are doing it in ours, you know? So, and second is, we now have, like I mentioned earlier, every legislative caucus in the legislature who supported this. There's no way through our oversight power, and I believe that local municipalities would do the same thing, stand by non-implementation status of Prop 16 once it's the land of the law. There's no way. We will do everything we can, and we will fight as hard as we can to make sure that every single sentence and comma in Prop 16 is implemented in its spirit and letter of the law.
Doctor, then and now, what's the difference?
I would 100% agree. It's a different California. I mean, the article this morning in the LA Times that talks about the changes in the demographics, not only in the UC, but in California. And there are so many voters who just were not voters, were not of voting age 20 years ago, who really deserve the opportunity to weigh in, and who are also in positions across the state who will be thinking about these very questions in terms of what it looks like to implement it on the other side. And so I'm really excited about actually the possibilities that are in the future as this moves forward.
And to your point, that article in the LA Times, I mean, we're so thankful to have UC Regent President John Perez to be joining us. He's actually on the line right now, and we'll introduce him in a second. But I do want to optimize the last few minutes that we have still with Assemblyman Santiago. So Cindy, you have another question to wrap it up?
I wanted to give an opportunity for Mario to just follow up if there's anything else he wants to say.
Yeah.
I am unmuting him now. Mario?
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being a part of this. And I can't think of something more important to help break the institutional barriers and racism that for so many generations have kept families in poverty. And I think we need to really bring hope and a better future for all of our young Californians listening. I'm particularly concerned about how we're going to hold educational institutions and its board accountable to reaching the educational equity issues that are so important. And I mean at all levels, both at the university level and at trade. I think that we need to look at industries like the creative industries and how they reflect the new California, both in front and behind the camera. We talk about California having a strong creative digital, being a creative digital enterprise, and yet very few people of color are in fact taking advantage of those opportunities. So for me, those are the broader questions about what is that new economy and where will people of color, and in particular Black lives, will be involved, as well as brown lives around the world.
Assemblyman?
I think this is, no, that's fine. Thank you, I appreciate that. Look, I think this is one big step. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, the opportunity to get an education, the opportunity to have access to institutions on an equal basis that we previously didn't have, I think gives us the opportunity to excel in some of those industries that we didn't have the possibilities of before. I mean, that's one of the simple answers that you can give to this. And that's the way I view this. Look, key to this is the ability to invest, to give everybody equal opportunity. And I keep coming back to that because this is what this is really all about, is to give us that opportunity to be successful. And I'll go back to the example that was given earlier. Currently, we cannot use monies to help any sort of particular, whether you call it race, culture, background, or ethnicity. You can't. The ability to pass Prop 16 gives us the ability to understand that certain communities have been left behind, and through policy and budgetary decisions, legally be able to invest in some of these communities because we know that they may need help in certain areas. Look, it's not going to be a secret here that we need to invest heavily in communities of color when it comes to education. We can't make that argument now in the way that I said it because Prop 209 is the law. But come the day after Prop 16 passes, we can take a look at it and say, yeah, you know what? There are Latino kids or African-American kids who are falling behind, and we know the reasons why, and we want to invest in these areas. And here's how we're going to do this. Can't do that right now. We have to look at other sorts of indicators, but we can't target that. We can take a look at contracting. I mean, let's pick on that. I mean, one way to create wealth in communities of color and women too, whether you're a white woman, Latino woman, African-American woman, API woman, is to give that opportunity to be successful at contracting. Look, I used to be on the LA Community College Board, most of you know. We couldn't target recruitment in certain areas because it was illegal under Prop 209. And subsequently, we left lots of our communities behind in contracting possibilities. What we were able to do is contract to small and emerging firms, because we knew that small and emerging firms was the one legal avenue we can do to contract to those who we thought might be captured under people of color. But now after that, we can actually say, look, there's an underrepresentation in these communities, and we need to invest to give them the boot camp possibility. Boot camps meaning the training to be able to apply for some of these contracts, the bonding assistance to be able to be insured before you go to contract. I mean, there's a number of things that you need to be prepared for when you go to public contracting. We just simply can't do it now based on what we know of a firm. And I think that'll change. I don't know if the doctor sees it the same way, but I think that is one, or sees it a little bit different, can explain it differently, but that's what I see and say when I heard your question.
Great, Doctor. Could you provide your perspective from the educational field?
Sure. I actually am really hopeful about the ability to track and keep people accountable to being able to use race once Prop 16 passes. And I say that because we work with districts across the state that say, hey, we're trying to use low income as a proxy for race because we can't use race. Or we really want to hire teachers that match the demographics of our population. We can't. So we're trying to use these other things to do that. And so there are a lot of people who've been trying to do these workarounds that are not working. And so in many ways, untying their hands and allowing them to actually use race to do the work that they're trying to do is going to be a really powerful tool. And I think there are a lot of districts that are positioned to do that. The other thing that it will also allow us to do in K-12 is that right now in the local control funding formula that every district has in the state, we cannot target funds to Black students or to Latinx students. And there's even been legislation created to try and work around that, which has not been as successful as we would hope. And so in many ways with this, exactly. And so now what's really exciting is we can actually say, hey, in statute, we are targeting these funds at these students, and we're going to track it and see how that is, we can measure that over time. So I'm actually really hopeful about our ability to be able to track the outcomes of Prop 16 on the education side.
So much potential, and it's interesting because it's like, two things that are happening. One, we have this new opportunity, but on the other hand, we're already thinking about improvements, right, on implementation, quantification, impact, marketing, outreach. These are all things that we've not even allowed our mind, or I can speak for myself, we haven't even allowed our minds to go there yet, right, for so many years, for decades. And now we're our thinking is kind of starting to defrost a little bit and thinking about the critical impacts around implementation. So I want to thank both of our speakers, and I feel the energy is building. You guys can't see it on your end, but the energy in the room is building, and folks just like are about to like burst because they have questions and they're wanting to get at the other folks and speakers. So first off, I want to thank, I know Assembly Member Santiago, you have to get going for your family responsibilities. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this rich conversation and action-oriented conversation. As a reminder, ULF and Latino Coalition have launched the Campaign for Nonprofit Resilience to ensure that local grassroots nonprofits who primarily serve communities of color withstand the current COVID crisis. More than 1,200 community leaders have already signed up for the campaign, and we encourage all CharLA guests and attendees to sign up and spread the word so we can collectively reach over 2,000 signatures by August 1st. Link is provided in the chat box. And lastly, before we go into our mixer with our other featured guests, please tune in to next week's CharLA, where we will be joined by El Monte City Manager Alma Martinez, who is the only Latina city manager of any major municipality here in the county of Los Angeles. And we're going to be showcasing her and her city's innovative municipal responses to COVID-19 that actually received recognition, not only locally, but statewide for their innovative and best practices. So thank you, everybody.